My name is Olivia Reynolds, and until 3 months ago, I was the apparent heir to Reynolds Industries, one of Boston's most respected companies. For 12 years, I worked alongside my father, William, transforming his small consulting business into an investment empire valued at over $200 million. While my Harvard classmates celebrated weekends in the Hamptons, I studied financial reports until dawn. While my friends planned weddings, I planned acquisitions. The Reynolds Industries office occupies the top 2 floors of a skyscraper in downtown Boston. From my window, I have a privileged view of the harbor, and on clear days, I can see all the way to the ocean. It was in this office that I spent most of my adult life. It was in this office that I learned everything about the business world. And it was in this office that I heard the words that destroyed my world. "Olivia, we need to talk." My father's voice, normally confident and resonant, sounded strangely restrained that morning. I looked up from the spreadsheet I was reviewing, an expansion project I had worked on for months. "Of course, Dad. What is it?" William Reynolds, at 62, was still an imposing figure. Perfectly trimmed gray hair, impeccably tailored suit, military posture. His success didn't happen by accident. He was brilliant, relentless, and, as I would discover, capable of a coldness I never imagined. "I've decided to make some changes in the company's leadership." He avoided my gaze, behavior so unusual that I felt a chill run down my spine. "What kind of changes?" "Nathan will take over as CEO starting next week. You'll be reassigned." Nathan, my younger brother. The boy who spent 4 years at Princeton mainly partying, who joined the company only 3 years ago, and who showed more interest in the receptionists than in financial reports. That Nathan. "Is this some kind of joke?" My voice came out more controlled than I expected, considering I felt the world crumbling around me. "No, Olivia, it's a business decision. Nathan brings a different perspective that I believe the company needs right now." "A different perspective?" I repeated incredulously. "You mean the perspective of someone who has never closed an important deal on his own? Someone who barely understands our basic operations?" My father sighed, finally meeting my eyes. "My decision is made. Would you like me to continue to part?" "Too. And what about me?" I asked, as the initial shock gave way to growing anger. "What exactly will my reassignment be?" "You can lead the corporate social responsibility department." He said this as if he were offering me a prize. Social responsibility, the division we created mainly for public relations, the division that had no real power, no real budget, or real influence on the company's operations. A position to silence me and push me aside. "I understand," I replied, my voice dangerously calm. That night, I drove to my Back Bay apartment in total silence. Not even the radio. I needed to think. As the elevator rose to the 14th floor, my thoughts whirled frantically. Why? Why now, after everything I had accomplished? The tears I had, held back, finally overflowed when I closed the apartment door behind me. I tried calling my mother, but as always, she was in her yoga class and would later have dinner with friends. Mom never got involved in the family business. For her, if my father made a decision, there must be a good reason. I realized I was alone in this fight. 2 weeks later, sitting in my new and tiny office on the 5th floor, I observed the change. Nathan arrived late, left early, and in between those moments, made increasingly questionable decisions. In meetings where I used to have a voice, I now remained silent, watching as my brother presented ideas that I knew were disastrous, as if they were brilliant. It was Jennifer Hayes, our chief operating officer, who first noticed my isolation. "This is ridiculous," she said, closing my office door behind her. Jennifer had been my mentor when I joined the company, a formidable 45-year-old woman who had earned her place in a male-dominated world through pure competence. "What? You trapped in this cubicle while your brother destroys everything you've built?" Jennifer sat in the chair across from me. "I just came from a meeting where he proposed a merger with Westlake Technologies." I felt my stomach sink. Westlake was our main competitor on the West Coast, and I knew their internal problems better than anyone. He can't be that stupid, I muttered. Apparently he can, Jennifer sighed, and your father is fully supporting it. That night, I did something I had never done before. I called Robert Blackwell, an old friend of my father's and one of the first investors in Reynolds Industries. Robert had always treated me with a respect that went beyond my family connection. Olivia, his deep voice sounded over the phone. What a pleasant surprise. Robert, I need advice, I responded directly. Have you had dinner? Could we meet at the Harrington Club? 2 hours later, I was sitting in the exclusive golf club, watching Robert digest everything I had told him. I always thought William could be stubborn, but this, he shook his head. Are you sure there isn't something else going on? It seems like an irrational decision, even for your father. What else could it be? Robert studied me for a moment. Maybe it's time you found out. Would you like me to continue to part 3? Robert's words stayed with me. There was something else going on. There had to be. The next morning, I arrived at the office at 6 a.m., a habit I maintained even after my demotion. The building was practically empty, just security personnel and a few dedicated employees who, like me, preferred the silence of the early hours. That's when I noticed something strange. My father's office door was ajar with the light on. William Reynolds never arrived before 8:30. I approached silently and heard voices. My father and Michael Donovan, the CEO of Westlake Technologies, here in our office, in an unscheduled meeting before business hours. William, no one needs to know about our previous arrangement, Donovan was saying. After the merger is completed, those records simply disappear. It's not that simple, my father replied, his voice tense. Olivia was starting to ask questions about the Seattle subsidiary transactions. She's too meticulous, always has been. Is that why you pushed her aside? Donovan asked. I froze. My blood seemed to turn to ice in my veins as the pieces began to fit together. We needed someone more flexible in charge, my father responded. Nathan understands the importance of this merger, and the problems disappear with her, Donovan completed. I slowly backed away, my heart beating so hard I was sure they could hear it. I returned to my office and locked the door, my hands trembling as I called Jennifer. I need you to do something for me, I said as soon as she answered. No questions. At least for now. For the next 2 weeks I worked in silence, maintaining a facade of acceptance while conducting a parallel investigation. Jennifer helped me access records from the Seattle subsidiary, a small technology company we had acquired 3 years earlier. Robert used his contacts to obtain information about Westlake's operations. It was on a rainy Tuesday that I finally found what I was looking for. In a rarely used archives room in the building's basement, I discovered records of transactions between our Seattle subsidiary and a shell company that, after tracing through several layers, belonged to none other than Michael Donovan. They were manipulating government contracts, I explained to Jennifer and Robert in my apartment that night. Westlake and Reynolds, supposedly competitors, were secretly collaborating to inflate prices in federal bids. That's fraud, Jennifer said, her face pale. We're talking about potential criminal charges. And your father knew, Robert concluded, not as a question, but as a painful realization. I contemplated the documents spread across my dining table, evidence enough to destroy Reynolds Industries' reputation and send my own father to prison. What are you going to do? Jennifer asked. I looked out the window at Boston's skyline illuminated against the night sky. The city where I grew up, where our name meant something, where I had dreamed of building a legacy. I'm going to save the company, I finally replied, but not for my father, not for Nathan, for all the people who work there and trust us. Sighing. Following day, I requested an urgent meeting with the board of directors, without my father or Nathan present. Would you like me to continue to part 4? Arranging a board meeting without my father's knowledge required subterfuge I never thought I was capable of. Jennifer scheduled it as a routine quarterly review in a conference room on another floor. Robert ensured all members would be present. When I entered that room, I felt the weight of 12 pairs of eyes on me. Veteran executives who had watched me grow up, some who had even given me rides to school when I was a child. Now, I was about to change everything. I appreciate everyone's attendance, I began. My voice was calm, but my hands trembled slightly as I distributed folders with the documentation. What I'm going to show you today goes beyond a simple performance. Review. Over the next hour, I meticulously presented the evidence I had collected. Emails, contracts, bank transfers, all pointing to the bid rigging scheme between Reynolds and Westlake. I showed how my removal coincided with my questions about the Seattle operations and how the proposed merger would erase all evidence. I'm bringing this to the board because I believe in Reynolds Industries, I concluded. I believe in what we can be, what we should be. A company built on integrity, not fraud. The silence that followed was absolute. Then Catherine Winters, the most senior board member, spoke. What are you suggesting we do, Olivia? I took a deep breath. We need to cancel the Westlake merger. Immediately. We need to conduct a full independent audit and be transparent with authorities about what we find. I paused. And we need a change in leadership. James Pearson, who had been my father's friend for decades, rubbed his tired eyes. You're effectively asking us to remove your own father from the company he founded. I'm asking that we save the company we all helped build, I gently corrected, including my father's legacy, the part worth preserving. The meeting lasted another 3 hours. There were arguments, questions, moments of disbelief and indignation. In the end, the board voted unanimously. They would temporarily suspend William and Nathan Reynolds, hire forensic auditors, and indefinitely postpone all negotiations with Westlake. And what about interim leadership? Catherine asked. All eyes turned to me. I left that room carrying a different weight than when I entered. I was no longer just the demoted daughter fighting for justice. I was now the interim CEO tasked with navigating one of the worst crises in the company's history. The following weeks were a whirlwind. My father tried everything, threatened to sue, threatened to disinherit me, threatened to destroy the company. Nathan disappeared completely, probably taking refuge in some exclusive resort. One night, exhausted after a day of testimonies for the auditors, I found an envelope under my door. Inside, a single sheet of paper with my mother's elegant handwriting. Livia, your father will never admit it, but you've always been stronger than him. That's why he feared you. I'm at the country house if you need to talk. With love, Mom. That unexpected note broke something inside me. I cried for the first time since it all began. Not from sadness or anger, but from relief. Someone in my family still saw what I was trying to do. Jennifer became my right hand, working tirelessly to keep operations flowing while we dealt with the crisis. Robert used his influence to calm nervous investors. The audit team discovered even more irregularities, some I hadn't even found. Are you sure you want to follow this path? Jennifer asked one night as we worked late. You could have used this information as leverage for a private deal. Your father would have given your position back to keep this secret. I stopped typing and looked at her. And then I would be exactly like him. It was at that moment that I realized this crisis wasn't just about saving a company. It was about redefining who I was, not just as William Reynolds' daughter, not just as the rejected heir, but as Olivia Reynolds, a woman willing to stand up for principles above power. Would you like me to continue to part 5? 3 months after the board's meeting on a cold autumn day in Boston, I faced the moment I simultaneously dreaded and awaited. The final audit report would be presented at an extraordinary board meeting, and my father had demanded to be present. After weeks of avoiding me, we would finally meet face to face. I arrived at the office an hour early, wearing a navy blue suit my mother had given me on my first day at Reynolds Industries. Symbolic, perhaps, a cycle completing itself. Ready? Jennifer appeared at the door of my office, which was now my father's former office. As ready as I can be. The board members arrived gradually, followed by the external audit team. I watched the room filling through the glass walls of the main conference room, my stomach in knots. Then he appeared. William Reynolds, the man I had idolized my entire life. He was thinner, with deep circles under his eyes and a hiding countenance I didn't recognize. Our faces met through the glass. And for a brief moment I saw something that almost looked like sadness in his eyes, but it quickly dissolved, replaced by a mask of defiance. The meeting began promptly at 9 a.m. Catherine conducted the initial formalities before giving the floor to the leader of the audit team, Marcus Mann. After an exhaustive investigation, Marcus began, his professional voice echoing in the silent room. We can confirm substantial irregularities in the operations between Reynolds Industries and Westlake Technologies, particularly related to government. Contracts over the past 4 years. Slides detailing the scheme appeared on the screens. Values, dates, names, the complete story of betrayal of public trust. These actions constitute clear violations of antitrust laws and may result in federal criminal charges, Marcus continued. The extent of involvement varies among executives, but our investigation identifies William Reynolds and Michael Donovan as the principal architects of the scheme. My father remained impassive, his gaze fixed on a distant point on the wall. As for recommendations, Marcus hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. We consider that proactive cooperation with authorities is the only viable path for the company. This includes the permanent separation of the individuals involved. Catherine thanked the auditor and turned to me. Olivia, as interim CEO, what is your recommendation to the board? I felt all eyes converge on me, including, for the first time that morning, my father's. It was the moment of truth. Before I answer, I said, my voice firmer than I expected, I'd like to ask if my father has something to say. A murmur of surprise ran through the room. It wasn't protocol, but Catherine nodded. William Reynolds adjusted himself in his chair, his shoulders rigid. Do you really want to hear what I have to say, Olivia? After stabbing me in the back? Yes, I replied simply. I do. He gave a bitter laugh. Always the perfect daughter, always so virtuous. His eyes scanned the room. You see her as some kind of savior, don't you? Let me tell you what really happened. I made tough decisions to keep this company competitive in a market where everyone plays dirty. Everyone! He pounded the table. And then my own daughter, whom I groomed to lead, decides she's too good for the real business world. That's not true, Dad, I interrupted, feeling an old pain resurface. I just wanted us to play clean. Naivety, he exclaimed. The same naivety that makes you think you can run this company. You may have impressed the board with your moral crusade, but you don't have what it takes to keep Reynolds Industries at the top. I took a deep breath, letting his words pass through me without knocking me down. Are you finished? He seemed momentarily surprised by my calmness. For now, I rose slowly, looking at each person in the room before speaking. 5 months ago, I discovered that my own father had pushed me aside from the position I deserved because I started asking the wrong questions. Today, we discover the full extent of the reason. I walked to the window, observing the city below. I could have used what I discovered to quietly negotiate my return. I could have turned a blind eye to protect the family name. But Reynolds Industries doesn't just belong to the Reynolds family. It belongs to its 3,200 employees, to its shareholders, to the clients who trust us. I turned back to the table. My recommendation is clear. We must fully cooperate with authorities, implement all changes recommended by the auditors, and make a public commitment to absolute transparency from now on. William and Nathan Reynolds should be permanently removed from their positions in the company and on the board. I looked directly at my father as I pronounced the last words. This is how we save the company you built, Dad. Not by hiding your mistakes, but by correcting them. The silence that followed was broken by the sound of the door being violently opened. My father left without looking back, leaving only the echo of his footsteps in the corridor. Would you like me to continue? To part 6. The board deliberated for less than 30 minutes before unanimously accepting my recommendations. I left that room not as interim CEO, but as the new executive president of Reynolds Industries, with a clear mandate to transform the company. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activities. We worked closely with federal prosecutors, voluntarily providing all evidence and accepting a leniency agreement that, although costly, avoided criminal charges against the company itself. Michael Donovan wasn't so lucky. Westlake Technologies imploded amid the scandal. As for my father, he faced the legal consequences of his actions, eventually accepting a plea deal that included a significant fine and probation. The empire he built remained intact, but his name was removed from the board of directors, annual reports, and gradually from everyday conversations in the company's corridors. Nathan reappeared after a few months, surprisingly sober, both literally and figuratively. In a discreet cafe far from the office, he apologized to me. I knew I didn't deserve that position, he admitted, staring at his cup instead of my eyes. But it was easier to accept what Dad offered than to admit I would never be like you. I never asked you to be like me, Nathan. No, but everyone expected it, didn't they? He finally looked at me. The brilliant Reynolds legacy. I just wanted to be part of it, even knowing I didn't have your talent or your courage. That conversation didn't resolve years of rivalry and resentment, but it was a beginning, a small crack in the wall we had built between us. At home, my mother became an unexpected ally, mediating occasional tense conversations with my father. He refused to discuss business or the past, but we began a slow process of rebuilding what remained of our family relationship. At first, we could barely maintain a civil conversation for more than 10 minutes. With time, we managed to share an entire meal without mentioning the company. He still loves you, you know, my mother told me after one of those dinners. That's the problem. He loves you so much that your rejection of his values destroyed him more than the loss of the company. I didn't respond. Some wounds need more than words to heal. At Reynolds Industries, the transformation process was equally complex. Jennifer accepted the position of Chief Operating Officer, bringing stability during the transition. We implemented new governance protocols, business ethics training, and a zero-tolerance policy for questionable behaviors. We dismissed executives who had been silent accomplices in the previous scheme. On a rainy afternoon, 6 months after officially assuming the presidency, I received an unexpected visit at the office. "Robert!" I exclaimed upon seeing my father's longtime friend enter through the door. "I didn't know you were coming today. I decided to drop by unannounced," he smiled, observing the changes I had made to the decor, replacing trophies and celebrity photos with works by local artists and an entire wall dedicated to the company's values. "It suits you, this office. I'm still getting used to it." Robert walked to the window, appreciating the view that now belonged to me. "You know, I followed your father's career from the beginning. He was brilliant, relentless, exactly what the market valued at that time." "And now?" I asked, uncertain about where the conversation was heading. "Now the market has changed, people have changed." He turned to me. "I saw the quarterly reports, Olivia. Your clients are returning. New talents are knocking at the door. You're recovering faster than anyone expected. We have a long road ahead." "Yes," he agreed. "But you found a new path, one your father would never see." That night, as I drove home along the Charles River, I reflected on Robert's words. In 6 turbulent months, I had lost and found my family, destroyed and rebuilt our company, and in the process, discovered a version of myself I never knew existed. The rain fell gently on Boston, washing the city as if to prepare it for a new dawn. Just as Reynolds Industries and I were finally ready for a fresh start. Would you like me to continue to the epilogue? 3 years have passed since that meeting that changed everything. Reynolds Industries now occupies a different place in Boston's business landscape and in my life. The company's transformation surprised even the most skeptical analysts. Our new direction, focused on ethical business practices and transparency, attracted a generation of talent that valued purpose as much as profit. We expanded into new markets, developed innovative partnerships, and, ironically, our profitability increased. As Jennifer often says, doing the right thing turned out to be good for business. Who would have thought? On a cold New England winter morning, I stand before the mirror adjusting my blazer before an important investors' conference. At 35, I see in the reflection someone I wouldn't have recognized 3 years ago, not just because of the new haircut or the subtle lines that have begun to appear at the corners of my eyes, but because of the calm confidence that has replaced the constant need to prove my worth. The intercom sounds, interrupting my thoughts. "Your car is here, Ms. Reynolds," announces the doorman. "Thank you, George. I'm coming down." On the way to the convention center, my phone vibrates with a message. It's Nathan. "Good luck today. I'll be watching online. Proud of you, sis." I smile. Nathan finally found his own path. After a sabbatical year, which included a personal development program and international volunteering, he returned not to Reynolds Industries but to academia. He's pursuing a master's degree in business ethics, of all things, and occasionally calls me to discuss cases and theories. I never imagined we would have this kind of relationship. The relationship with my father remains complicated. William Reynolds paid his debt to society and now lives a quiet life, dividing his time between the Boston house and a mountain cabin he bought after the scandal. We meet for dinner once a month, a tradition initiated by my mother that we maintain even after their divorce was finalized last year. In our last meeting, he said something that still resonates with me. "You saved the company in a way I never could, Olivia." Perhaps that was the plan all along. It was the closest we came to a true reconciliation. The car stops in front of the convention center. Before getting out, I check my notes for the opening speech. It's the first time Reynolds Industries will host the annual Ethical Investment Conference, an event that has grown from a side panel to the industry's main gathering. Jennifer waits for me at the entrance, impeccable as always in her gray suit. "Ready to show them how it's done?" she asks with a smile. "More than ready." We walk together through the lobby, passing a poster with Reynolds Industries' new logo, redesigned to symbolize our transformation. Below it, our new motto, "Building Value Through Values." When I take the stage and face the audience of executives, investors, and journalists, I see some familiar faces. Robert is in the front row next to my mother. Nathan waves discreetly from the middle of the audience, and at the back, almost hidden, I recognize my father. He didn't confirm his attendance, but there he is, silently observing. "Good morning, everyone," I begin, my voice clear and confident. 3 years ago, Reynolds Industries faced an existential choice: continue an unsustainable path or completely reinvent itself. Today, I want to share what we learned on that transformation journey. As I speak, I realize that this story isn't just about a company that survived a scandal. It's about a woman who found her own voice, a family that lost and rediscovered parts of itself. And above all, it's about the courage to stand up for what's right, even when the personal cost seems too high. Reynolds Industries continues, different, stronger, and finally aligned with the values I always believed in. And I, Olivia Reynolds, finally found my place not just as the heir to a name, but as the architect of my own legacy. When I finish my speech, the audience rises in applause. In my father's eyes, I see a glimmer that could be pride, or perhaps just acceptance. It's enough. For now, it's enough. Some say we can't choose our family or our legacy. Perhaps that's true. But I can say with certainty that we can choose what we do with them, and that choice makes all the difference.